The Federal Reserve Act, Part 4. Federal Advisory Council. Section 12. There is hereby created a Federal Advisory Council, which shall consist of as many members as there are Federal Reserve districts. Each Federal Reserve Bank by its Board of Directors shall annually select from its own Federal Reserve District one member of said council, who shall receive such compensation and allowances as may be fixed by his Board of Directors, subject to the approval of the Federal Reserve Board. The meetings of said Advisory Council shall be held at Washington, District of Columbia, at least 4 times each year, and oftener if called by the Federal Reserve Board. The Council may, in addition to the meetings above provided for, hold such meetings in Washington, District of Columbia, or elsewhere as it may deem necessary, may select its own officers and adopt its own methods of procedure, and a majority of its members shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. Vacancies in the Council shall be filled by the respective reserve banks, and members selected to fill vacancies shall serve for the unexpired term. The Federal Advisory Council shall have power, by itself or through its officers, 1. To confer directly with the Federal Reserve Board on general business conditions. 2. To make oral or written representations concerning matters within the jurisdiction of said board. 3. To call for information and to make recommendations in regards to discount rates, the purchase and sale of gold or securities by reserve banks, open market operations by said banks, and the general affairs of the reserve banking system. Powers of Federal Reserve Banks. Section 13. Any Federal Reserve Bank may receive from any of its member banks, and from the United States, deposits of current funds in lawful money, national banknotes, Federal Reserve notes, or checks and drafts upon solvent member banks, payable upon presentation, or, solely for exchange purposes, may receive from other Federal Reserve banks deposits of current funds and lawful money, national banknotes, or checks and drafts upon solvent member or other Federal Reserve banks, payable upon presentation. Upon the endorsement of any of its member banks, with a waiver of demand, notice and protest by such bank, any Federal Reserve Bank may discount notes, drafts, and bills of exchange arising out of actual commercial transactions. That is, notes, drafts, and bills of exchange issued or drawn for agricultural, industrial, or commercial purposes, or proceeds of which have been used, or are to be used, for such purposes. The Federal Reserve Board to have the right to determine or define the character of the paper thus eligible for discount within the meaning of this Act. Nothing in this Act contained shall be construed to prohibit such notes, drafts, and bills of exchange, secured by staple agricultural products, or other goods, wares, or merchandise, from being eligible for such discount, but such definition shall not include notes, drafts, or bills covering merely investments or issued or drawn for the purpose of carrying or trading in stocks, bonds, or other investment securities, except bonds and notes of the Government of the United States. Notes, drafts, and bills admitted to discount under the terms of this paragraph must have a maturity at the time of discount of not more than 90 days, provided that notes, drafts, and bills drawn or issued for agricultural purposes or based on livestock and having a maturity not exceeding 6 months may be discounted in an amount to be limited to a percentage of the capital of the Federal Reserve Bank, to be ascertained and fixed by the Federal Reserve Board. Any Federal Reserve Bank may discount acceptances which are based on the importation or exportations of goods and which have a maturity at time of discount of not more than 3 months, and endorsed by at least one member bank. The amount of acceptances so discounted shall at no time exceed 1/2 the paid-up capital stock and surplus of the bank for which the rediscounts are made. The aggregate of such notes and bills bearing the signature or endorsement of any one person, company, firm, or corporation rediscounted for any one bank shall at no time exceed 10% of the unimpaired capital and surplus of said bank, but this restriction shall not apply to the discount of bills of exchange drawn in good faith against actually existing values. Any member bank may accept drafts or bills of exchange drawn upon it and growing out of transactions involving the importation or exportation of goods having not more than 6 months' sight to run. But no bank shall accept such bills to an amount equal at any time in the aggregate to more than one half its paid-up capital stock in surplus. Section 5202 of the Revised Statutes of the United States is hereby amended so as to read as follows. No national banking association shall at any time be indebted or in any way liable to an amount exceeding the amount of its capital stock at such time actually paid in and remaining undiminished by losses or otherwise, except on account of demands of the nature of the following. First, notes of circulation. Second, monies deposited with or collected by the association. Third, bills of exchange or drafts drawn against money actually on deposit to the credit of the association or due thereto. Fourth, liabilities to the stockholders of the association for dividends and reserve profits. Fifth, liabilities incurred under the provisions of the Federal Reserve Act. The rediscount by any Federal Reserve Bank of any bills receivable and of domestic and foreign bills of exchange and of acceptance authorized by this Act shall be subject to such restrictions, limitations, and regulations as may be imposed by the Federal Reserve Board. Open market operations. Section 14. Any Federal Reserve Bank may, under rules and regulations prescribed by the Federal Reserve Board, purchase and sell in the open market, at home or abroad, either from or to domestic or foreign banks, firms, corporations, or individuals, cable transfers and bankers' acceptances and bills of exchange of the kinds and maturities by this Act made eligible for rediscount, with or without the endorsement of a member bank. Every Federal Reserve Bank shall have power, a. to deal in gold coin and bullion, at home or abroad, to make loans thereon, exchange Federal Reserve notes for gold, gold coin, or gold certificates, and to contract for loans of gold coin or bullion, giving therefore, when necessary, acceptable security, including the hypothecation of United States bonds or other securities which Federal Reserve banks are authorized to hold. B. To buy and sell, at home or abroad, bonds and notes of the United States, and bills, notes, revenue bonds, and warrants with the maturity from date of purchase of not exceeding 6 months, issued in anticipation of the collection of taxes, or in anticipation of the receipt of assured revenues by any state, county, district, political subdivision, or municipality in the continental United States, including irrigation, drainage, and reclamation districts. Such purchases to be made in accordance with rules and regulations prescribed by the Federal Reserve Board. C. To purchase from member banks and to sell, with or without its endorsement, bills of exchange arising out of commercial transactions and hereinbefore defined. D. To establish from time to time, subject to review and determination of the Federal Reserve Board, rates of discount to be charged by the Federal Reserve banks for each class of paper, which shall be fixed with a view of accommodating commerce and business. E. To establish accounts with other Federal Reserve banks for exchange purposes and, with the consent of the Federal Reserve Board, to open and maintain banking accounts in foreign countries, appoint correspondents, and establish agencies in such countries whatsoever it may deem for the purpose of purchasing, selling, and collecting bills of exchange, and to buy and sell with or without its endorsement, through such correspondents or agencies, bills of exchange arising out of actual commercial transactions which have not more than 90 days to run, and which bear the signature of 2 or more responsible parties. Government deposits. Section 15. The monies held in the general fund of the Treasury except the 5% fund for the redemption of outstanding national bank notes, and funds provided in this Act for the redemption of Federal Reserve notes may, upon the direction of the Secretary of the Treasury, be deposited in Federal Reserve banks, which banks, when required by the Secretary of the Treasury, shall act as fiscal agents of the United States, and the revenues of the government, or any part thereof, may be deposited in such banks, and disbursements may be made by checks drawn against such deposits. No public funds of the Philippine Islands, or of the postal savings, or any government funds, shall be deposited in the continental United States in any bank not belonging to the system established by this Act, provided, however, that nothing in this Act shall be construed to deny the right of the Secretary of the Treasury to use member banks as depositories.